joined the AI team. I was one of the founding engineers.
No, I am just
What do you mean? What does it mean to like compute for AI or
Infra for
infra for AI? Like GPUs for AI?
No, not GPU. Like we started with the inference platform. So you can
It's facing really up, the camera.
We do all the hardware related management, GPU management, resources, things like that.
Turn off. Got it. So is this a cloud offering or like
mostly on-prem, but it is cloud native, so you can actually run it on any.
So you are in the GPU business, that you would acquire GPUs and then sell it.
We don't sell the GPU directly. We provide the software stack, so customers can either rent the GPUs or they can build their own GPUs as it gets managed.
Check. Where are you? You're not even there on the front.
That's okay. The gizmo looks cool.
The gizmo looks good. I think somebody needs to disrupt this stuff, the AI.
Yeah.
Insta 360.
And then
They
focus.
could probably do that actually.
Yeah, and then focus on the person who is speaking. Like.
That one I think a lot of Cisco's cameras do that. The conference rooms.
Yeah, but that is like enterprise, but like consumer grade where you just put something.
There is a company which actually does that.
On the consumer side?
So if it's a group, like not a very big group, like small group, then it zooms into the
Got it.
one of these Kickstarter kind of companies.
And also turns around. Oh, this is 360.
Face the camera, yeah. If 360 gets in, then yeah. But with 360, the problem would be that it's anyway recording all around. So
Correct. But it's just when you're broadcasting on Meet or Google, Zoom, etc. Right?
Shall we start? Yeah. All right, everyone. Hi. Good evening. Thank you for making it here, especially for the people who are offline. Do we have online audience here? Joining in? So who here has heard of Fifth Elephant Hasgeek? Do you know what you're here for?
I've heard of Fifth Elephant, but I don't know.
You heard of it. Everyone has? I'll give you like a brief introduction. So Fifth Elephant is basically a community of mostly developers, also non-tech people as well, PMs and architects and everyone. So this community is primarily around bringing together people to have conversations, to get information about like what is the upcoming technologies in the market, what are newest practices that are happening in the market, keeping a check on what is the pulse of the industry at the moment, right? So that is what Hasgeek does. So we conduct a lot of conferences. Fifth Elephant is one of them. We have other conferences as well, which are not tech oriented, which are design oriented, but there is also the tech and non-tech. So it's like a community which brings together all people from all streams, right? This birds of feather session that we are doing right now, this is the idea that we don't want to do it like a presentation where a speaker goes onto the stage and like talks through like one use case that they have built. We have 4 speakers who come from different streams, different backgrounds, dealing with different sets of problems, right? And the idea is that we want to get inputs from them or learn from their experiences to know what they have done, how they have done, and why they have done things. That is the general idea of this thing. At the same time, we also want people who are sitting over here, people who are online who have joined us, to like chime in with their questions. I will wait for questions from you. I'll ask for your questions. I'll take your questions and we'll repeat them back to the group so that everybody knows what is being discussed about. And we will take it from there. So this is an open discussion. We want everyone to engage, ask questions, get clarifications. If somebody is saying something that doesn't make sense to you, maybe bring it up. Maybe they have an answer for that why they did it in some particular way. So that is the general idea. Everybody gets it, right? So we don't want it to be a debate. Maybe we do it like the people who are here. If they have a question, just put up your hand or something so that I notice you and I can answer the question. Yeah? Yes.
How did Fifth Element name come from?
How did Fifth Elephant name came up? Zainab, I think you will have it. How did Fifth Elephant come by the name? Why did we call it Fifth
Elephant? The name
Elephant?
of the Terry Pratchett book. We can talk about it on coffee.
Yeah, it's a coffee table discussion. Right? Let's take it. Let's take our core panel speakers. They will introduce themselves and then we'll take the discussion forward. Introduce yourself, what do you do? And where have you adopted AI? So we'll start with that, then we'll take it forward. Yeah?
Okay.
Each of you.
Hey guys, my name is Kiran Kumar. I work at PhonePe, and I've been doing mobile development for quite a while. It's been approximately 14 years now. 2011 is when I started with the first iPhone and the first set of Android devices, and I still do mobile apps at PhonePe. So if you have, previously I was working at Uber, Myntra, Flipkart, built their apps. So if you have those apps installed, then you have my code running on your phone. I'm not taking any data from there, don't worry about that. But that's, and yeah, where do I use AI? So at PhonePe, we have a bunch of new projects which are aimed at multiple domains. So I work on primarily, I've been experimenting a lot with image gen, the Nano Banana Pro model specifically. A lot of experiments going on extracting product information from images for our e-commerce arm within PhonePe. And I've also used it where primarily we used to give support for some of our vendors. And there the support was primarily through normal phone calls. So I built a project where the AI is able to see the screen of the sellers and vendors and then give a primary support if you know their software is not working, some debug logs, streaming the logs back and then giving them instant support, etc. So CX domains, image gen, image attribute extraction are primarily some of the projects where I have contributed directly at PhonePe.
Hey folks, my name is Giridhar Murthy. I work here at Glean, so familiar faces here. So at Glean, our mission is to use AI to empower every employee to do the best work that they can. So as you can imagine, we are like an AI first company. We build cutting edge AI products, but we also use AI products very heavily within Glean. So happy to share more perspectives on that. Prior to joining Glean, I've been both at big tech and really small startups. Before Glean, I was running my own startup called Slang Labs, which was a really small startup. So I can share perspectives from there as well about AI adoption and what we're doing. But yeah, like I said, at Glean, we use AI to build products. We also ship AI-based products. That's the primary bread and butter of what we are shipping now. So we've been using AI pretty heavily since I don't know, the past couple years, I would say, even before I started. And even at the previous startup, we were basically building a voice and NLP stack for Indian languages. The NLP that we started with was so it was bad, it was all rules and statistical models and all of that. It was really hard to work with, but over time we started seeing more of these LLMs, BERT-based models, and then the GPTs come in and really change the paradigm. So we're using a bunch of that over there as well. And now at Glean, we use LLMs to power a lot of the work that we do under the hood. So that's my background in AI.
Cool. Hey, hi folks, Saurabh here. I am one of the co-founders of QueryGen. We are an intelligence layer on top of WhatsApp for teams and businesses that run their operations on WhatsApp. Prior to this, I was working at Jiva. It was an agri-tech company based out of Singapore, and we were providing services to the farming ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So I has to look after off-take related product charter over there. So basically whatever happens to your crop after it's harvested, till the time it reaches the end buyer is what I was looking after. I'm also part of the early team at the product folks. So it's a community of product managers, builders, tech folks. So yeah, that is something about me. Where do we use AI? Because we are an intelligence layer, we are monitoring conversations, we make embeddings out of it, and we give you a searchable interface. So that is one of the applications. In my previous role, I was using AI for a lot of prototyping and helping with product execution workflows.
Hello everyone, my name is Manoj. I'm a founding engineer in Nutanix AI. Sorry. Basically we are building AI platform to run modern AI, right? So it's basically an inference platform where you could run any open source language models, right? So it started actually as a inference platform, but now we are doing kind of end-to-end AI related stuff, which has support for say gateways, routers, and things like that. Right? The adoption of AI for us has been mostly, so I've been involved in building agentic workflows for external as well as internal systems, and then we use a lot of AI tools for software development. We actually started with GitHub Copilot, then we gradually moved to more agentic tools, IDEs, right, like Cursor. I've been using AI for around over 2 years now for software development, and happy to share my experience today.
So we know that your platforms offer AI services and AI integrations and everything, right? So the conversation over here, what we're trying to address is, are you using AI as your teammate? Like, are you using, like I think Nutanix already mentioned that they use some tools as part of the daily workflows, right? So how about your team's experience? So do you like have a dedicated tool that every developer on your team or every PM on your team is working with on a day-to-day basis to kind of like get the job done? So if you have something like that, we would like to discuss about that, right? So having that kind of information is something that is important for developers these days to understand, like how do they incorporate AI into their day-to-day activities, not just as a product feature of the tool that they're building, but also is it making their life easier or is it making their life difficult? So I'd like to ask you first, do you have a tool that your team or you work with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think there's no single tool per se, but different roles or different sets of people are using different tools. For example, the general tools which are available to everybody is like your G Suite, which has Gemini AI Studio out of the box, and Gemini Chat as a standard feature. So that's like the common horizontal which is available to everybody to sort of talk to, right? Mm-hmm. And that's part of like your offering by Google, right?
Okay.
And when it comes to, I have a different answer for design, I have a different answer for QA and testing, I have a different answer for developers in general.
Okay.
So at PhonePe we use Copilot for your standard development, Copilot with agents, the models which are available. So it's given out of the box to every developer who is onboarded at the company, right? If you are a designer, there's some internal tools we have built on top of Nano Banana, which I spoke about. So when it comes to creative work of generating images for some of the UX mockups, or maybe images which are going into production as part of your banners and merchandising stuff on the app, right? There we have built internal tools on top of Gemini as well as GPT image APIs. So that's some in-house tooling, but I think there are some standard tools which people have explored outside, but nothing great has come out of it, right? When it comes to the creative work. On the testing side, especially on the mobile app testing, like the front-end testing world, right? We did some experiments with mobile.dev, which is a platform which used to give automated AI-based workflow testing. So you can just go to that platform and say that, hey, I want to test out the checkout flow, or I want to say the payment flow, and then it discovers the screens by spinning up an emulator, spinning up browser for a web application, and then it does the testing. And then we also found issues there when it comes to reproducibility of the test cases, which was like a big important thing, because AI would behave differently every time you run, right? And over and above, on top of it, by sort of using GPT APIs, which is doing much better than what comes out of the box, because then you control the execution strategy, etc. Right? So I would say different teams have started adopting it in different ways, and we are sort of always on the hunt, looking out for ways to improve the productivity of each of the person, right?
Okay.
So that's my answer about that.
All right. How about it, Dean?
Yeah. So I can speak more from the engineering team perspective because I'm part of that, so I can provide like more first-hand experience. So there are two tools that come to the top of my mind. Like what I personally use a lot is Claude Code for most of my engineering tasks, right? Whether it's for writing code, for understanding code that I have not written, like in pretty complex code bases, you want help, and I rely on Claude Code quite a lot. And then for reviewing, and so it's a pretty integral part of my workflow. And I know that the engineering team at Glean heavily uses Claude Code, Cursor, and like all of these AI assisted tools to help with workflows, right? And like get stuff done. That's a pretty powerful tool that we've been using. The second one, like at the risk of sounding like a pitch, like Glean Assistant is what we use. Like we dogfood that very heavily, and it ends up being very useful in addition to tools like Cloud Code, because there's a lot of additional context that we can use. Like for example, if my build is failing and if someone else had faced this a couple days earlier and posted about it in Slack, I'm able to quickly surface that by using, like I just ask Glean Assistant and then it tells me what the issue was and it helps me like move fast. So I would say these are two tools that I personally find very useful, and probably most of the folks on the engineering team also would probably concur with that.
So the Glean Assistant that you said, is it something that is internal to your organization, or is it something that you also offer?
It's a product that we offer to customers that we also use internally. So anyone that has a Glean subscription will also be using the same product.
Got it. How about escalation?
I would love to give examples from my previous role, where we were using Claude mostly for our product ops related work. What I'd figured out a workflow for myself was giving as much context as I could for one of the Claude projects, which was a lot of PRDs that we were working on, a lot of Figma wireframes, and eventually it became more of a intern/assistant for me to exponentially reduce amount of time I used to invest in writing PRDs, Jira stories, so on and so forth. Something that we adopted a little later on was using Anyten. So Anyten is a very visual friendly agent builder. So for the non-tech audience, there's a learning curve, but definitely easier to pick than trying your hands on coding. So Anyten is something which we experimented a lot with. A lot of features initially started out as hypothesis. We tested out on Anyten without involving a lot of dev effort, and which then were pushed onto production as well, right? So yeah, Anyten was something that was really, like, you felt really empowered from a non-coding, non-tech POV.
Since you're also a founder, do you insist on tools being part of your team? I mean, is it something like a decision that top management kind of takes, that yes, we want to use AI, or is it something that has come out of habit and practice that, okay, it makes sense to use AI in a particular scenario?
Very early, it's just three of us. One of us writes code, and I think the amount of code that we are shipping is equivalent to around having a team of 2 or 3 developers together, if you were to look at from a pre-AI lens, right? I don't think a lot of what we are doing today would have been possible without using Claude Code, for sure. So yeah, AI has been using AI tools has been a very prevalent part of our journeys, and I think whenever we would be looking to hire folks, that is, I think, a no-brainer that we would want to make sure that you're equipped with a lot of these tools and nuances.
Nutanix?
Right. So, like most of us here, we also rely heavily on AI-based coding, right? And we particularly use Cursor a lot. Other than that, we also have some agentic workflow. So one of them is a support kind of portal, which is actually external facing also, and we also use it internally, right? And like Kiran mentioned, the usage is kind of fragmented right now for all of us, like who are from different departments or teams. It's kind of fragmented. We have something called code review agent also, which actually eases our life a lot. Like it takes the first pass at the PR and then picks, surfaces the nitpicks and so we don't have to spend a lot of time. But what we are actually looking at is, since the usage was pretty fragmented, we are trying to kind of consolidate the usage somehow, right? So the way we do it is like for all our internal or external facing application, we use the Nutanix AI platform itself, which actually provides a single entry point to most of our AI calls, right? So there's a gateway layer which kind of gets all the requests, and we can gather insights from that, like how everybody is using AI in the organization, right? So that is something we are trying to experiment with. But yeah, the usage has been pretty fragmented. But having said that, the productivity gains have been significant.
So this is a question more for the audience right now. Extending the question to the audience, like, do you use any tools in your day-to-day work at your organizations when you are working on your tasks or anything? If anybody would like to answer.
So kind of similar journey. First of all, I'm an engineer, so I head a team of machine learning engineers, and we do video analytics on top of CCTV videos. Started with GitHub Copilot. Like that point of time, I think it was autocomplete only. It was pretty good, but at that point of time, it felt revolutionary, to be honest. But looking back, it feels like it was so naive. Then Cursor, I started like in the initial days, it was honestly very shit. Like the first version of Cursor was very, very bad. So I tried it. I was like, no, Copilot is pretty good. And then after 6 months, Cursor caught up really well. And then moved to Claude. So eventually, there was a time where Cursor was not very, very good, and the context problem everyone was facing in the industry. So at that point, Claude as a platform, independent platform, was very, very good. So most of the time was copying and pasting code to Claude and getting the results, because Cursor didn't have much capabilities. Then slowly moved to Cursor, then moved to Claude Code, and after Claude Code, I think as an engineer, you never want to leave CLI, it feels like now. So it had been a journey, but I'm very open to trying out new tools. What I've felt is, let big tech fight, and let's take the best out of it. So yeah, I tried anti-gravity. It's pretty good as well, but I think we should definitely not be married to any one tool. That's what I've learned in last 2.5 years, because these tools obviously had a lot of bugs. I think Cloud Code had one bug. I don't remember the specifics of it, but they had a very bad bug, and it was performing very, very bad after the update. But with I think 2.5 versions, they solved it. So yeah, it had been a very fascinating journey, and I think started with writing testing code first, and all the surrogate tasks. But now doing a lot of parallel things, like not touching a lot of production code, but making a lots of forks and running a lots of experiments.
Since you mentioned that you lead a team of engineers and everything, right? So have you felt like the use of these tools kind of augments my team, or does it eliminate a position in my team? How do you feel about that?
I think it augments, like if you augment your team, it eventually leads to elimination, right? However, many times what happens is how the engineer reacts to these kinds of tools. I've seen both. Like I've seen people not really want to learn new things, and then there are some engineers who are really curious enough. I think if you are really, really curious, it augments you a lot, and for those kinds of engineers, it increases by a lot. Now there are some engineers who really are, they don't want to try new things and they don't want to go for new tools. I think earlier, like 1 year back, if you have asked me the question, I think both of them could coexist. But slowly and slowly, I feel because the AI is becoming so good, the gap is increasing day by day. So I think in future world, it would be very weird to coexist. I don't know what will happen, but yeah, it's coexistence is tough.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
I myself, Manish, I'm managing a team in Nutanix, and I've been having 20 years of experience in infrastructure. So the question is regarding the tools we use, right? So it's kind of a mixed experience. We started with evaluating tools as the AI grows, right? So right now we have multiple tools on multiple areas, and for searching we use one tool, for coding we use one tool, for UTs we use another tool. Like Manoj was also mentioning that we have one tool that we provided for the support and SR teams for evaluating and checking their side of bugs and their side of queries on calls and all. So right now we are heavily dependent, or we are heavily consuming the cursor for code writing and UTs and basically the helping hand on the coding part. But it's mostly it's still has to go a long way to write and help us a lot. And whereas another question you asked for the elimination, I don't think that as of now the elimination come into picture, because we have a lot of work to do. And it definitely improves the productivity, but a lot of items are in play to consume and cover all of those aspects.
If you can share, what work are you using this? Like, is that like writing configurations, planning, code?
Yeah, so it depends on the different teams. So we have TPM, they try to use the write the documentation. But like I was saying that there are different tools they use, right? And cursor we are trying to write the first level the first level of the code. Then we double click on it, restructure it, and then make it more usable. And one is the cursor, the another is documentation creation, the test creation, and UTs creation. So all of those we use.
Anyone else? Anyone else? So I'll bring back the question to you folks as well. So now that you have introduced tools into your workflow, and you are seeing increased productivity, have you felt the need to like maybe reduce your team sizes or increase your team sizes with people who know how to work with these tools? So how do you feel about the adoption of these tools in your teams?
I can go first.
Yeah.
So, from what I can tell, like the usage of these AI tools have actually augmented the capacity and the productivity of engineers to kind of do more quicker, explore areas that they previously may not have been able to. And overall, like folks who are very good at using these tools or who have mastered them and know how to wield them at the right places, like they are seeing a huge explosion in productivity and in like getting stuff done. But again, it's not trivial. You can't just say, hey, build me a database or something and it builds it for you, right? You need to know how to wield it. So it's not like you can stop hiring because there are more of these tools available. So I think it's somewhere in between. You need to have a set of people who are competent and who can wield these tools and know when to use it, use good judgment, know when to say no and when not to ship something that is bad, right? All of this put together, when you combine this with powerful tools like this, then you basically hit the sweet spot. So I don't think it kind of is like a binary thing here where it would either be a replacement or not a replacement. So it sits somewhere in between is my experience.
Does anybody have a differing opinion on this? In case. Yes.
Slightly to add on to what he's saying,
Sure.
it all depends also on the systems you're dealing with. For example, when you're building something like a POC or building something lightweight where you're trying to validate an idea, the productivity gains are like humongous. Like whatever you can think of, what if you want to, let's say, build a console to automate some CX agent like customer service agents or some simple stuff where there's some content you want some quick reviews on that document or stuff like that. It's a very good system to be. But let's say if you're dealing with a transactional system which is dealing with money movement or accounting and anything which has compliance, where the government, especially in the PhonePe world, there's like a lot of government oversight into what you can do, what you shouldn't do, right? That's where it gets very tricky. So you cannot trust some of the code which is generated by AI unless you have reviewed it, and then reviews take time, and then you cannot suddenly become ultra productive because you have to go slow in certain ways, right? Like it's like maybe you are working in an aerospace industry, you cannot go fast because the government wants you to be very careful because you're dealing with lives there. You're dealing with money, so any 1 rupee being leaking somewhere, and you say, hey, the AI written code, I don't know what is happening. That's not going to cut it, right? So I would say, depending on the kind of work you're doing, sometimes it is humongous gain, sometimes you will hit a ceiling. You cannot go beyond a certain, because the slowness or the bottleneck is something around you, not just code generation.
So interesting that you bring that up, right? So that is my next question to the panel as well as to people who are working with tools. So how do you audit your tools? How do you determine which tool can be introduced into the ecosystem? So do you have like a framework that you use to figure out, like, because you're essentially talking about tools that will have pretty much unlimited access to internal data inside the company, to code, to maybe even, especially with Nutanix implementation, it has infrastructure access and everything, right? Sensitive secrets and data and everything. So how do you do your auditing of your tool? So how do you figure out, like, is this tool something that I can bring into my company and make it a standard for my teams to work with? How do you do that?
I can take that. I think so. At the end of the day, the way we look at it is it finally simplifying the human workload, right? Somehow it should be helping with the human productivity, right? So the way we look at it is it's kind of a sum of the workflow speed, the quality that you get out of it, and finally the human relief, and maybe divided by cost, right? And then if this ratio goes up, that's pretty good for us, right? So that's how we look at it, and we do have metrics around that. Like, for example, after introducing Cursor, so Cursor was actually in a trial phase for a long period of time in the firm. We did look at like the number of tickets getting completed over a quarter, let's say. But overall, I feel that the productivity gain that we get out of it is not about speed. It's about reducing the cognitive load on individuals. Right? For example, if a junior developer is working with a code base, so is he able to gather the context as quickly as possible? Right? Is he able to understand, let's say, how a request flow through the complete system? So that kind of gain, if you're getting, right? And for senior engineers, like for myself, what I've seen is the tool able to free me up, right? Do I have to still answer the trivial questions of my team, or the tool can take care of it, and I can focus on other things, right? So that is how we look at it. So there is a mix of specific metrics that we track, as well as the overall feel and vibe of it, right? How the tool is actually performing. So that's how we look at it.
Mention vibe. Who does vibe coding over here? Who has done, like, built something with vibe coding? Avi, what have you built?
So I, as my personal website, kind of built vibe coded. It has more than 500K Google impressions in last 3 months. Like my personal portfolio website, I try to make all the visualizations of the concepts. It's vibe coded, and also build a lot of dashboards, internal dashboards, which are vibe coded. Definitely, like, whatever is production grade or something which requires scale, I tend to avoid it. But a lot of small hobby projects and the things which I usually don't know. So right now I am trying to vibe code a platform for my personal learning. Like I have a Obsidian setup. So in Obsidian you make very good nodes, right? Like what connects to what. So suppose that I'm reading about hardware, and I'm reading about RAMs. but then I don't understand what is static RAM or dynamic RAM, or there is some gap there. I'm building a platform which can identify my skill gaps. So it's for me. So I kind of utilize my Cloud Code every week. That's my goal.
Do you hit your limits?
Yeah, every week.
Anyone else? What is vibe coding? Yeah? Perfect. You have a mic. So I actually recently vibe coded two prototypes kind of thing. So one was I was actually playing around with generative UI. So I feel like chat as an interface for such a revolutionary technology like AI is not good enough. So we need to work on the experiences more, and which is where I was experimenting with generative UIs, right? Which essentially means that you don't have a fixed set of UI, and LLM takes call of what to display to the users, right? In a gist. So we built actually a generative UI version of our inference platform itself. It's just internal right now. We are just experimenting with it, but it actually was able to simplify the workflows of creating an inference endpoint, running your models, and things like that. Right? So that is one. And the other, one of the more ambitious thing I'm trying right now is wipe. So yeah, so I wipe coded the whole thing there. The other thing that I'm trying to wipe code, which kind of is difficult for me to be honest, is I'm building a UI component library for AI, right? Which has support for, like I said, generative UIs as well as a component of building an agentic workflow. For example, you have when you are building an agentic workflow, you have things like interruptions, humans in the loop, things like that, right? MCPs, tools, and all. So I'm trying to build it, but the experience hasn't been that great, to be honest. Like that's what I felt like with vibe coding. You can deliver the V0 of it, but if you have to iterate on top of it, it kind of makes the job pretty. I think it makes the job even harder than what if you would have done it without starting with vibe coding. So is everybody aware of the term vibe coding? Sorry, I did not. Everybody knows about it? Yeah. Nobody has heard it? Okay. So when you say vibe coding, we pretty much say that we are hands off in the development phase. We are just prompting the AI tool to kind of build. But how do we know that the code that is being generated is safe? So what kind of guardrails do you put in place to ensure that the tool is doing the right thing or the safe thing at the same time? Also, like you said, V0 is something that you get to, right? But from V0 to 0.1, if you want to like add more features into it, what do you do to get there? So have you done any experiments around that?
I mean, I wouldn't trust the code the LLM is generating. That's the baseline. And then from there onwards, it's very natural to see what it's generating, look at every line of code, at least at a high level, make sure. I mean, one of the things I generally do is, as part of the prompt, I say, make sure some of these are followed. Like non-negotiables, if you clearly prompt, it does a pretty good job, especially Claude, Opus, Sonnet, and all of that. If you say you have to make sure performance is top-notch, you have to make sure the security is not compromised, and you have to build that base prompt. I have like a collection of prompts which I keep around for every project. So start off those projects with those non-negotiables, and then review every line of code. And even before like committing it and treat them like an intern generating a code for you, right? Like you don't trust an intern, right? Nobody trusts.
So I totally agree there, right? As a senior engineer, I'm totally paranoid with the code that it generates. I have to review every single line of it, right? And at times I've come across scenarios where it subtly added something and then it came up during the code review, right? Why was it done? But I think one way to kind of put it in check is like know your tools really well. For example, for us, like we use cursor a lot, like I said. So you have an option of adding cursor rules, right? So you can add your custom cursor rules there, which will guide the output of your LLM, right? So we have the whole style guide present in our cursor rules, which it has to always take into consideration when it is generating a code, right? Then you have access to a bunch of MCP servers. For example, we have our internal design system and component library, and it has an MCP for that. So it always takes that into consideration. So if it is generating let's say a React component, so it will not generate some random React component or wouldn't use a random open source library, right? It will use what you have given it as a tool. So basically, you have to provide all the data in the context, all the right data, and then just hope that it works well. But at the end of the day, the developer has to take the ownership of the code, right? You cannot say that it is AI generated. You have to review every single line. Before that, I just want to ask a question. So you mentioned that you have been using the tool to as a team of 3 engineers, right? So that means you're shipping a lot of code. So how do you trust the code that you're generating in your application?
Team of 1 engineer.
A team of 1 engineer.
1 engineer, and both of us are actually selling the thing. I think we have put some evals in place, which we had run it through some of the synthetic data that we had generated to ensure that the outputs that we get, that we are showing to the users, because it's an intelligence layer, people are using it for like a very similar Glean-like use case. So we've run it through a couple of eval frameworks and all to make sure that the outputs we are generating are in accordance with what we would want it to be. And this was also something that I would wanted to check with the tech folks over here. Like, are you using evals in any shape or form to figure out how's your LLMs are performing, how are your code outputs and stuff like that? So that has been a point of curiosity for me as well too.
So can anybody tell me what is eval? Because I don't know what is eval. Sorry. I mean, you mentioned it, I don't know what is eval.
So, yeah, I can take a stab. So, you want to figure out if the LLM, which is generic in nature, is able to do a good job at the specific problem that you are trying to solve or use its help to solve. So you define a set of test cases that should be solved correctly by the LLM for your particular problem. And you basically run it through that problem set, and if you end up getting the right results, then you know.
Are you using evals?
Yes, we use evals very heavily within the company because.
This is from a code perspective.
Sorry?
And you do this from a software development perspective.
Not from a software. So I think there are two distinct things here. One is we build and ship AI products.
Okay.
So now, in order for us to be able to ship an AI product confidently backed by LLMs, we need to build our own evals and ensure that they are doing fine. But from a coding perspective, I think that goes back to your previous question of vibe coding versus how to ship it to production, right? I think by definition, I think when you're vibe coding, you're just letting the code run, right? You're not really caring too much about how something is built or whether it's performant or all of that. It's just something to, take to completion. But when you're trying to ship something to production, right? When you're part of a company trying to ship something to customers where it's important for it to be correct and all of that, then I think your mindset and approach and the usage of tools, all of that changes, right? So some sort of rigor needs to be in place, whether it's in the form of you can have more interactive sessions where you break down the task into planning and then a back and forth and then agree on the plan, then an implementation and all of that. And then you also have code reviews where not just you but the other people who are looking at code and signing off on it, right? So that would be the sort of guardrails you have in place in a more serious context. Whereas vibe coding is more for I just want to try this out. So I think a mindset difference there would
so
be
my experience is a little different because I'm from the infrastructure and security side.
Yes.
And in my work experience, we have been running infrastructure that handles a ton of ingress traffic, north of 200 terabytes a day.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things I've found with evals especially is that when you're dealing with infra at that high frequency and that huge scale, we kind of get scared. We say, okay, LLMs are a thing, we love it, yes, it's given me some Terraform code. But what happens is, it's one thing to generate Terraform code, it's another thing to have a LLM evaluate, and then it's a third thing to finally deploy it. And there's always prayer ops, right? You pray, hey, here goes nothing, and you hit Terraform apply, right? So one of the things that I do when you say evals and things like that is essentially we go the opposite way of what AI and people are trying to get with vibe coding and just cursor. When we use cursor, what we say is we ourselves have a plan in place that yeah, I need to deploy 3 or 4 components. I know what are the changes that I'm expecting. We put those in, we wait for it to generate that code, we generate a plan, and then from there is a human in the loop. Because when you're dealing with something so critical because that has happened multiple times, like accidentally some small JSON property changes and it's like a 300-line JSON. All of a sudden, nothing is working. Turns out it has disabled WAF. It has set it to auto block. You have no idea what has just changed, right? So to prevent all of that, what we do is we make sure that we only change one component at a time, or we make sure that the plan is exactly what we expect it to be, right? Having that human in the loop for us from an infrastructure perspective is just, it works a little bit better than evals on LLMs, because there's I'm sure you guys have heard, right? Like, they deletes an entire directory, deletes somebody's database. So one of the biggest things we do is none of our cursor tools have any of those commands on an allow list. There is no allow list, right? We ensure, in fact, routinely we would check if accidentally someone has clicked, allow list this particular command. No allow lists, no AWS execution commands, no GCP execution commands. We explicitly have it in our cursor rules. Do not create execution commands, right? Because you got to safeguard yourself as much as possible. And finally, one last thing we do to make sure it is even further isolated and broken away from everything is that the machine that uses and our laptops that generate infra code from cursor are not the same ones that apply. Right? You commit, you take it to a separate server, you look at it again, and then you apply from there. So that's how we do it with infra and security, because depending on LLM evals, very difficult. So our guardrails are 3 or 4 layers. Like, we check cursor, make sure there is no allow list, make sure laptops that have cursor in it do not send anything to production, things like that. Just 3-4 different actual levels of security that are built in, just because the damage it can do is very, very high. Because with software, I think when you build an app, there is still a QA phase that takes place. But in infra, if you hit Terraform apply, you're just doing prayer off it at the end of the day. So that's what I think. It's better to have something from the old school still in place to make sure that it doesn't impact anything. We are dealing with just pure infra. That's just my experience with it. So
I can actually add one more practical use case for evals. One thing is, like, I consider LLMs, evals as unit tests for LLMs. So the practical use case, one of the use case we had actually is that evals can actually help you reduce cost in a way, right? So the first step when you're building any agentic application is, one of the fundamentals is what model you use, right? So the way we usually approach it is like, you select the best model out there, you create your evals around that, and you set a benchmark, right? And then from there, you can actually look up to mid-level models, and try to make it somehow meet those benchmarks, right? So the way we did it is, we actually started with something like that. We started with a good model, and then you employ different techniques like fine-tuning a mid-range model, which could be faster for execution, as well as the quality matches up to the level. So once you have fine-tuned the model, and if it works to those benchmarks which you have set up, it's actually helps you save a lot of cost, right? And then evals are kind of helps you with rapid iterations also. Once you build your evals, and then you could make changes more confidently, and if it works with the evals, it kind of works. So that is one of the
Fair point.
So we have an online question from people who are online. So this is something that goes into the whole thing about AI governance a little bit. So we are sharing proprietary data in our organization. We download models from different places, which is still fine because models technically cannot leak data. But if you're working with tools like online platforms like Claude or GPT, Gemini, or I don't know, so many tools nowadays, right? So if you're using tools like that, so how do you ensure that your company is compliant with all the laws? Like, there could be PII data, there could be security compliance, there could be government mandated compliance and everything, right? So how do you ensure that your tools that you have introduced into the organization are still compliant, and how do you ensure that it's working? So do you have any metrics, any framework that helps you do that?
At least, like, I'll tell you my experience. So at PhonePe, the default option is a whitelist option for all the LLMs instead of a blacklist one. So by default, we don't let anybody and everybody download a random model or ID which is not certified or at least been tested with when it comes to PI and security, etc. And wherever we end up using, especially Copilot with Claude, is the combination most of us use, and that is where there's an agreement with Microsoft and with GitHub, etc., where there is an explicit contract signed that this data will not be used for training, or this data will only reach so much, right? Like in terms of the boundaries. So that definitely has helped people from sending out data which they're not supposed to send. And then comes your regular sort of guardrails which have been set up, which is PI information should not be available in an unencrypted format, which you typically do with any sort of finance data, right? Like with all the DPDP laws coming in, nobody, not even humans, are allowed to look at unencrypted PII data, right? So some of those governance related stuff happens even without AI. So I think if your data is already protected from humans, it is of course protected from AI upfront, right? So that is the sort of guardrails you have to set up even before experimenting with AI. That's
how about this, right? So typically we are using AI tools in a chat interface, right? And where developers are pretty much pasting prompts into this, and yeah, maybe senior developers are mindful enough not to do it, but it is very highly likely that junior developers have pasted in some proprietary information. Maybe they are like they want to do some analysis and they're trying to find a formula on how to do this formula, and accidentally pasted in data which is very proprietary to the organization. Especially in fintech, it's very obvious, right? So how do you prevent something like that from happening in your organization? Like, because it's a chat interface, it's a tool, and text is being transmitted over the wire, right?
Yeah, because I said it's a blacklist, sort of whitelist model, not a blacklist model. Your tools are not available unless they are secure in the first place, right? Like if you go to, let's say, I don't know, Claude, free version of Claude, right? It won't even open up. The tool is not even available unless you go through Copilot and then select Claude, and by which Microsoft guarantees that your data is not used for training as per the contractual agreement with Microsoft. So that is where that tool is not even available to that set of developers who deal with very secure and like finance related data, right? And of course, there is also audits which happen. So any data access of large amount, right? Typically, it goes through an audit trail, which is periodically also reviewed. That's from a compliance standpoint. The government does this audit across the company to see how much information is available to what set of people, and is there ways to guardrail even exposure of information.
Are there any certifications mandated?
There's no certificate, but this because PhonePe is one of the largest in terms of market share in the UPI. I think the RBI directly works with PhonePe to make sure nothing in terms of a breach is even possible, and that also makes the teams go very slowly and very carefully, and that's where they don't end up wipe coding that much, because by design they are meant to be slow and very careful, and that's the pros and cons of working within that domain, right? But so there are certain teams which don't have those compliance requirements, so it's much more easier to get wipe coding out.
Okay. Since we have two folks from the infra, I think three guys, right? So this is for you. Like, how do you ensure that secrets of properties or keys and shared secrets and stuff, they don't get accidentally pushed into tools? Like, do you have anything that prevents it from happening?
I think sure, I think
Yeah.
first.
I mean, you have the cabinet.
One of the ways we do it is in our tools, right? So mostly the issues comes while you're coding if you have anything sensitive in your environment variables or things like that, right? So one of the things is like you can actually instruct your cursor, in our case, to not access certain files, right? And it cannot access it, it cannot read it, or it cannot use it in its context. So that is one of the ways we actually prevent exposing any sensitive keys or things like that in the AI tools.
Now, can you put these guardrails on org level? Like everyone who is using Cursor in Nutanix, is there a way to do that, or it's more of an individual this thing that you have to?
Yeah, even if it's this is an enterprise license, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Even you put the keys, it's it's still secure, right? It's not going outside. But just to touch upon the previous point, right? Whitelisting, right? You get the enterprise licensing, and you consume there. But still, there are customers and there are people who don't want to send their data even to the cloud, right? Like defense, like banks and all, right? That's where NAI Nutanix is coming into picture. That you download your models on-prem and try and consume those. So we are consuming those on many of our internal experimentation in our internal consumption. But yeah, means definitely the whitelisting is the one thing that we can do.
Maybe I can add something. So regarding this, right, like private data and sensitive data, secrets and all that, I tell my team, don't worry about it. Why? Because all these tools, right, Cursor and all, these have gone through rigorous legal and compliance audits and all that, evaluations. Only then these tools were approved, signed, and open for everyone in the organization. So we don't have to worry about these things. Privacy mode is on, no data is retained, zero data retention policies and all that. Lean has that, I think Cursor has that, ChatGPT has that. So all these tools provide those things, and certifications, SOC compliance, ISO compliances, everything is there, right? So as a end user, right, as a developer, we have to use it, abuse it, don't worry about it. Like you, yeah, do vibe coding, don't do vibe coding, do that human loop thing. That is really important, right? Because see, think from a development perspective, right? Execs are thinking it's productivity gain. They don't care it's 1%, 2%, 10%, right? They need some productivity gain, that some dollar value they're getting, right? At the end of the day, we have to answer if anything goes in production through this, Cursor or any other tool, which is breaking up, creating bugs and all that. We are creating PRs, writing code using Cursor. The PR is reviewed by a code review agent, right? Then QA is testing it, but QA has also written the automation using Cursor or some other tool. The pipelines are, most of the scripts are now being written through these AI tools. So see how much AI is here, right? So that's why we need not guardrails, human guards. Actually there. Because there is too much AI already happening. It's been a revolution since this thing happened, hype happened or whatever happened, right? Everyone gets excited. I have written Slack apps, which it used to, take weeks for me to write a single Slack app. Now I can write it in a day, right? But I don't know what is happening inside that Slack app now. It's working, that's fine. I don't care. But the end result is.
Proof, mechanism where you say, hey, if I need to use AI, I need to generate a script. I need to, I am not a big org with resources to have isolated instances and, move my script around and stuff like that. It's fine, right? As long as the credential does not enter the LLM's context, right? You are golden. So even if it generates a script, the thing is, it is better for it to just have credentials injected on the wire, after it's trying to execute something. So that way, what happens is, even if there is, nowadays I'm hearing a lot of things with shadow AI, where people say, hey, company has a license, great. I have my own license. I pay $20 myself. I have my own cursor, and nowadays I think that is also gone because I have my own anti-gravity. So then what happens is, if there are no credentials anywhere on the developer laptop, and everything is done via network traversal auth, right? Essentially, then you zero out that risk of leaked credentials, because that thing then has enough policies, things like that, to whatever guardrails the organization has, rotation policies, maybe least privilege, whatever it is. But essentially, keeping that credential out of the whole conversation that you're having, the prompts, the generation, the thinking, the plans, right? As long as you keep it out of that, I think the risk minimizes to a great extent. And like you said, right? Yes, of course, you're correct that if you have the perfect enterprise agreement, yes, they're not going to take data. The problem is, I feel, with shadow AI. And it's very difficult to define also what is shadow AI, because let's say legal says, hey, guys, no cursor, because we don't know where it's going to go. Legal blocks it. Here's the thing, right? People figure out, I can go to a certain website, pay $20 to them, for example, open, it's called open router, and I can pay for it. And there's a very high chance legal has never heard of open router, right? And that's how people use AI, because it's a very big productivity improvement. So my approach to that is essentially just don't have credentials on the actual device that you're trying to work with. Especially, again, this is purely for things where you're dealing with infrastructure and security and things like that. If you're a developer who needs to get code out there, run POCs, of course you have to set up something on your local, maybe get a Postgres engine up and running, test things out. Love that, right? But the minute you go to production, the minute you are someone who is responsible for keeping your applications up and running, just think about eliminating credentials. Just think about how can we do this, where we just have it generate scripts or the commands, but don't inject credentials. So that's like my philosophy for it. But yeah, happy to hear thoughts of people who had some experience with this.
Yes, so sure, go Satish.
I did exactly the same thing what he mentioned. Literally gave concept whole access, and then I gave it like a public documentation and asked it to just follow the documentation. And then unfortunately I became a victim of some security incident recently. I just wanted to share that. So in the documentation, I think there were some NPM packages and all it needs to install and run some NPM packages. Cursor did it itself. And then at the end of it, what happened was the NPM package somehow read my GitHub credentials and uploaded it to a public GitHub repo. Yeah, that's the same attack. And then I think after a few hours, our security team detected that my credentials are floating in public internet, and they deactivated my account for a day. So after that, I think I'm just not executing commands automatically if there is any public URLs there. Only I'm executing automatically if only internal things is doing.
Yeah, that's a good learning. Yeah. You think?
Yeah, so just to look at this human in the loop in a slightly different context, I think there are probably two sets of guardrails, or I don't know what's the better way to put it, but so you can have a lot of these structural things in place, like what you're saying, like you air gap your computers that run LLM code, and then you have a separate one that actually applies a Terraform and all of this, and write your rules and all of that. So that's the structural part. So you can come up with a lot of structure around it. But I think the second one is like cultural, right? Like a culture of ownership, as an example, right? Like is effectively what you are saying here as human in the loop. It doesn't matter if you want someone else to review the code, or you going to review the code, as long as you are aware of the fact that you own the code that you ship, right? Whether you wrote it with an LLM or wrote it by hand, doesn't matter. You own it, and if that causes bugs down the road, you're responsible to fix it. So just have that sense of ownership, right? So I think a combination of these two, and the boundaries between these two will keep evolving over time, right? How much of this can you codify into structure? How much of it can you just keep it as ownership? Is going to keep changing, but I think you need a bit of both, right? Like human in the loop who is aware of the consequences and knows when to use it and when to not use it, I think is really important. You can't just say push a button and ship it to production.
I think people who are more experienced in their domains, the need for that has been ever higher today
Yes.
because of AI.
Yes.
Rather
Yeah.
than people say, hey, you don't need to know anything when I started.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like the intern example I was talking about, right? If an intern can cause an outage or a breach, the problem is not in the intern. The problem is with your guardrails and whatever you've built around it. I'm sure Cloudflare will come up with one more thing and say an intern caused it. But that's not an intern problem, right? So it's not an LLM problem.
I think all of these, like you mentioned, right, was happening earlier as well. Means if people used to put it into the source or somewhere at open sites that guide me. This is my code and all. But it is more apparent because of AI tool. It's a chat window. Users start chatting. But definitely the thing is that you have to provide and the same cultural principle that you have to guide them that they should use the internal tool instead of going outward. Anyhow, if they are using their own chat, and that has to be come from the culture.
I think so. There's a saying I heard somewhere like LLM makes the same mistake as humans do, but faster.
Oh, that's really nice. So that actually brings me to a very interesting question, right? Since we have been talking about interns who shouldn't cause outages and everything, how do you see the future of freshers who are graduating out of college coming into the industry now? So we agree that the AI tools are something that should be used by a experienced individual so that they kind of know how to use the tool, right? But how do we make sure that fresh graduates who are joining the team now, or new people who are joining, not just fresh graduates, it could be a lateral hire who is coming into the team. So how do we impart this knowledge of how to use the tool now? Because earlier, at least when I started my career, right, I had mentors who would sit with me, who would give me like small assignments over a couple of weeks. I would work on them and then learn how to do things. Pretty much, I did not ever push code into production probably for my first 2 years of my career, pretty much. I never pushed code into production. So I was just doing POCs and fixes and stuff. In this world of AI, where AI tools are pretty much doing all the minor jobs and minor activities, so how do we bring our new engineers up to speed in this case? Is this something that anybody else also feels like?
I have a slight modification.
Yeah.
So, as a fresher myself, I
Okay,
often
we have a fresher. Very
yeah.
good.
I often feel conflicted as to how much of AI should I use so that it's not like too much. I don't learn anything out of it, and by not using it, I'm not being left behind, because at some point of time Google came in, and I believe the people who did not use that time must have been left behind, because now it's like a commodity, and I believe that AI will become a commodity one day where everyone will have access. But it does as in slow down the growing of the brain, procedure of the growing the brain, right? Like the development of the brain where I'm understanding concepts if the AI does everything. So like where do I draw this line where this is too much to ask from the AI, but this is what I can do from the AI?
I think a good way to think about this is, again, I keep telling that what was old is new again, right? Back in the 1980s, when you had compilers come up, people were afraid. They were saying, I've written assembly for the last 20 years. I have a brand new C compiler. How do I ensure that my programming language is generating the correct assembly code? People were very afraid of that, and compiler correctness was a thing. And there were a lot of debates, lots of mathematics that was given and proven and all of that. And that is where like the evals point comes back into play, right? Like you guys suggested as well. Where as long as evals get better and better and better, that correctness ability goes up. Once correctness as an ability goes up, you stop thinking about smaller things. Like if you are an assembly developer, you would think about pushing data into a register, moving that by X number of bits, then XORing with something. Those are lower level details. Today you think about an if statement. Today you think about a for loop. Same way, as a fresher, because you have this, because when I started, I didn't have this, and I had to learn all the syntax by hand. In fact, knowing multiple languages like Python and Java was seen as a skill value. Now, as evals get better and correctness of that thing increases, because I'm telling you, correctness has gone up a lot. I've been using AI for a while, and first cut AI was just bad, like it was purely bad, to a point where most of us in infra gave up on it. But now it's gotten so good that I kind of rely on it. So as that happens, you start abstracting those components. Maybe you might not know the nitty-gritties of Python 3.6 or Python 3.18 or the differences between the language, but it frees up your time to think about the problem you're trying to solve. You are being, you are being given your job function because you are solving a problem. They are not having you do a job function because you are aware of archaic Python syntaxes anymore. Like the whole reason why today people hire senior Java developers is because they know something about Java 6 most of us have forgotten, probably didn't even realize existed. But because of that correctness, if that improves, today your job will purely be to think on a layer above that, This is XYZ behavior that I want to bring, ABC testing that I think we should perform. I think there is a potential pitfall here. You start thinking in these terms, and once you start thinking in it, if there is a bug in production, let us say, that is a bug that will come after evals get really good. Again, I want to preface it again, once evals get to a point where compiler correctness and evals kind of work on the same level, you think, okay, there was a flaw in my thinking, rather than a flaw in the way the compiler works or way the language works, right? Of course, race conditions, those one-off errors, random, very one in a million errors still will exist, but 90% of times what will happen is it will be a small error in your thinking. Maybe you anticipated 10,000 people to access your server that day, and you built a database, so you built your performance along those lines. You realize it's a Friday weekend sale, 100,000 people approach, and one of your algorithms that you thought is a good algorithm maybe didn't have the time complexity. So what do to rectify it is, you don't go start hunting in the code, where is my if-else statement, have I written the correct loop? You don't think that. You say, okay, I use this algorithm. It's got, let's say, for whatever reason, it's got n square complexity. Can you switch it to something that does n log n? I'm pretty certain it will still work. And that is the level of abstract that is the level of abstract that you're having. That I think, because when I'm seeing folks come up with newer and newer stuff, it's just amazing. The way they think, it's amazing. Like this stuff I never thought of. That's what I think. Is that you should not worry too much about it. I think you'll learn the boundaries naturally. AI gets better, you're gonna start thinking in much more higher order levels of thinking. So that's what my personal opinions are.
So like I have one kind of makes sense, but I think one, there is a transitionary period, right? Like the switch from assembly to compilers was like binary, because compilers are deterministic and it would always generate correct code. But LLMs are still not deterministic. You still don't know if it is correct or not. So like a lot of writings I see, even coming from people like Jensen of NVIDIA, says like, oh, now engineering is going to be prompt engineering kind of thing, right? So I think that is taking it way too extreme, right? Like as fresh grads, I think this is not the industry has suddenly not gone into like you just writing English commands all through, right? It's not there, definitely not. At the very least, like we should be able to predict what program is going to get generated. If you ask the LLM to give you whatever, help you solve a problem, you should at least be able to predict what it's going to write and then verify that that is what has happened, even if not line by line, but at a high level, right? Or if it goes and does something completely different, but that is still correct, then you've learned something new, right? But I think it's not like a step function where you're going from, oh, I need to learn computer science concepts to, I only need to know English, right? So it's not so bad. But instead, I think whatever you've learned in your computer science, you still need to apply it. You still need to hold the generated code to that standard and make sure that if it is not, that you fix it manually or you guide your prompts or whatever. But I think there's still a lot of value to knowing the fundamentals and being able to reason about the generated code and all of that.
Anybody else?
Take the help of the tools. You should know the tools and how to consume it. And don't let it become your nanny, right? You just give everything, give me everything, right? So if you don't know the architecture, the flow, you're not able to write the good code, right? And eventually, if you are totally dependent on that, then the bugs, the issues came in later will take more time than the time that you spend in the writing of the code, right? So earlier, like, in our infra, we were going down to the spec level. The USB2, we are reading the spec, we know the register, we are writing the drivers code over there, but I don't think that you guys are, doing that job. You are asking and the spec and it will give you the solutions, right? So take the help, but don't get into that, provide the overall solution. You should know the solution, what you are, proposing, what you are writing, but instead of, don't get overwhelmed with everything. So, 2 cents.
Yeah, take the microphone. No, it's fine. I have.
So I think
Because our online audience cannot hear us.
So I think LLMs can also be used to learn faster and learn more in a more optimal manner. So what happens sometimes if I'm solving a problem, right? Now as an engineer, there is always different opinions on different architectures. Like if I should do this way or that way, or if there are better ways of doing it. Traditionally, you would Google search, you will search in Stack Overflow, you would ask people in Reddit. But with LLMs, it has so much data ingested, it actually gives me really good insights on what I can do. The pros and cons, I can quickly take decisions. This way, I actually learn faster. Even if I'm building something new, and if I want to grab some sort of a concept fast, I can just do it very quickly. If, for example, yesterday I was understanding a code base, an open source code base, I just asked LLM, how are they solving this particular aspect? And it immediately, and I gave it some references to its repo where I think I want to understand something better. It just gave me a very good explanation. That way I was able to learn faster and proceed.
I actually keep thinking, I thought about this problem. I think you started with new hires joining a firm. How do you onboard? So how do you actually solve this problem at scale, right? So we just guided one person here, but how do you solve it in general at scale when there are many new joiners joining, right? So I don't know what's the right solution, but what I think about is I think there is a need of AI literacy, wherein I think right now people and engineers, everybody is using AI in silos, like they use it as they like it or as they know about it, right? I think there is a need of AI literacy and the culture, like Giri was talking about. How can you teach companies and individuals like how to rightly use the AI? When the result is generated, how do you make sense of it, right? How do you think about it? I think there is a lot of scope there also to expand this. Some of the ways I think we can do is like in companies you could have sessions on these, you could have small hackathons around it, and things like that. But I'm sure, I definitely know that there's a lot of scope in this area to be explored.
I read this somewhere that LLMs are good at, if you ask an LLM, can you come up with a joke? It can come up with jokes which have been cracked before because of all the training material. It cannot invent a joke. That's where the brain is like such a massive sort of power which we have, where some of the creative ways of coming up with something which is very funny is something which you will learn with skill and with time, right? And that is what will be valuable for you as well later. I'm sure it's like at a meta level I'm speaking, but it's like something, there will be some tasks which humans will still be good at. Not everything will be an LLM based thing.
So largely, we are talking about tools that have been built by companies like Meta or Google or OpenAI and everything. So someone on the online forum has also asked this question. Is there still any value in companies doing deep learning, like training their own models, building their own models and hosting them themselves, everything? So Does any of your company invest into it, or are you more like consumers of existing tools? Do you see a scenario where it would make sense for you to like build your own model or build your own ecosystem within your organization because it serves a very niche purpose? Do you see that?
Yeah, actually.
So we have been doing ML before generative AI. So that that's actually a very unique thing to say these days. So we deploy a lot of object detection algorithm because the nature of the business, and now slowly we are venturing into vision-based small VLMs. I think there is a very famous project called Moondream. So we are right now hosting our own Moondream. We have our own we are not hosted in any other platform. Like we have our own complete infrastructure which we bought. It's actually cheaper to do that way. If you are having very specific set of problems, not a very general problem, I think one of the other thing would be like OCR, right? I think DeepSeek came with OCR like in a very ingenious way, which was really interesting, where they were converting the whole image into tokens, and then based on that they were running on like OCR on top of them. I think these kinds of specific problems I think will be eventually taken up, and people would like to host them themselves, and not training from scratch, but training only the last layers or fine tuning it, not training actually fine tuning it based on their own use cases. I think will have some value, but I don't think so it would be good for all the use cases. I think it would be very specific use cases for different domains. But I think domain specific models will get popular, and as the Moore's law is good to us, I think with time we will have some of the domain specific models running on our laptops. I think DGX Spark is also there, although the performance is debatable, but there are people who are working on those kinds of solutions.
But since the majority of your LLMs allow for fine tuning and everything, wouldn't it be more cost efficient to make them instead of building from scratch?
I'll tell you from our use case, right? We already have GPUs, we already have the complete infrastructure, and during certain time periods, because it's a really cyclical nature of our business, during certain time periods I have empty GPUs. I can always use that. So, and I'm pretty sure like we are not the only ones. Like a lot of people who are right now buying so many infra, they are hosting it and they want to keep all the data to themselves. So somewhere or the other, wherever the governance, as sir was rightly pointing out, there is some governance, there is some different kinds of talking about infra. I think it was rightly mentioned, like leakage of your keys. Those things, I think, I'm pretty sure LLM, and I actually wanted to ask him, why are you so like mindful? I'm pretty sure you might have burnt hands in your life ever, and it's a human nature, right? You burn your hands and you learn, and I think the whole world is learning that way, and slowly people who are being so careless right now with LLMs will slowly guardrail. I think somewhere or the other, like I was going through the recent tweets from a lot of IC companies that all the IC companies right now are built on top of Chinese like they're fine tuning on top of Chinese models, right? Because they are better ones. But eventually, US government will also have a lot of guardrails that you cannot use them. So there is still a lot to come up, but I think because of like also you have to understand the compute which we are right now getting, right? This is not the actual cost. Like we are getting a lot more cheaper and VC version of the things which we are getting right now, right? Like every company right now is giving compute a lot more cheaper just to gain all the users. I think in future it wouldn't be as cheap as it is right now. So companies are also understanding that part, that eventually you need to pay the price. So everyone is it's kind of like a fork, not a mainstream one, but it will always exist. At least in Reddit, there is very famous subreddit called Local Llama, where now people are building their own ones. They are very much uh, uh, afraid of big tech stealing their data. I think ChatGPT is also not earning a lot of money. They will eventually run ads, and then it would be again a debate, right? For your company data, like I know that they have a lot of things signed, but still people will trust them less. I think that's a cycle with every kind of business.
Fair points. Does anyone from us?
So actually, I want to add a few more points. So apart from fine tuning and training from scratch, like many companies are also looking at mid training, which is like continuous pre-training. So this stands in middle between either extremes, where if you have, like, I know some companies like they have source code in resource low language like Haskell. So the only way is to do some kind of continued pre-training where fine tuning cannot help.
So, like my take here is that if for all tasks that are somewhat language related and have can afford this large models, it makes sense. But there are probably a lot of domains where this is not really the case, right? Like, why would you use an LLM for ranking or for recommendations? Or I mean, I'm sure there are people trying that, but it's like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail thing. Like it may not really be necessary in all scenarios. It still makes sense to develop specialized models for domains that are constrained and the bounds are well established. I think it still makes sense, and you get better performance per watt or performance per dollar if you build specialized models for these. So I still think there is a lot of scope for having smaller models that you train from scratch for different domains, not go all in on LLMs in all scenarios.
So something that Avik mentioned, right? So Avik, yeah. So something that you mentioned that cost will increase in future. Do you feel that way? Will the cost increase? Will the cost decrease? What do you feel? I mean, we know that the current AI services that we get, they are heavily subsidized by YC funding and VC funding and everything, right? So how do you think that organizations will react to it when the actual cost is passed on to them? So how could organizations kind of prepare themselves for that sticker shock when it happens?
I think it'll keep dropping. The prices will keep dropping, right? And yes, the popular notion is that these are all heavily subsidized, but even in reality, I feel that the inference costs are coming down heavily all the time. They're building more specialized hardware that is more specialized for transformer architectures are coming up. So the cost per token is definitely dropping, and which is why we're also seeing those those savings being passed on, right? Like if you look at the Gemini 3 Pro cost, they are like really low. Even the Opus 4 point whatever the latest one is like really low compared to what it was before. So I think the cost will keep dropping. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when you're suddenly going to start paying 10x for your inference cost, because the whole economic model will collapse if that happens. Instead, we would probably see more ads being injected and more freemium products being offered and all of that. But I don't see that kind of, like, if there's only one player in this market who monopolizes, then maybe. But I think now that's not the case. There are enough players with reasonably similarly spec models. So I think there's never going to be like a time when everyone's going to make it 10x more expensive. That's my
also adding to that point, sometimes it's not very apparent. Quantization is happening, and that is sometimes like you can see the performance dropping. Especially it happened on Claude 2.0, and also we can see that OpenAI got rid of the O4 series totally. right? Like five, like it went for like it got rid of O4, O3, which were actually very good models, and then went to like 4 to directly 5, which was not very good, and now right now they are on 5.1. Like this was definitely the major thinking behind this definitely was cost. That's what my opinion is, because the previous ones, they were actually expensive to run.
Does anyone in the audience have anything to add?
I think it will give rise to a bunch of new startups for sure. Like for example, like the vision-based APIs are very expensive to run at India scale, right? Imagine like those become really cheap that, you know, the only advantage probably to a great extent India had was cheap labor, and then now we will have robots running with vision models which are cheaper than that labor cost itself, right? Like that might flip the whole equation and a whole new set of startups doing robotics might come up. Who knows? That's like a opportunity which is going to get unlocked next, right? That's what I think is going to happen with the cheapness coming.
Cost is coming from the hardware, the coolant, the actual GPUs, the hardware you maintain is the really costly stuff, and the data that is coming in humongous, and you keep on training your actual models. Now with the pre-trained models, it will definitely go down, and you consume the inferencing, and then you take the pre-trained model, and on a specific, Lee was mentioning, there is a specific use case, right? You train your model at that specific use case itself, and then start consuming it. So, also for once you have your model, trained, then definitely the cost will go down. But it also, the other part of it is that you are generating trillions of bytes of data every year, right? So, yeah, so means God knows, like if you want to fetch all of those data, or you want to, have a pre-trained model consumed.
Is it also electricity problem? I think a lot of people have started investing in figuring out how to solve for cheaper electricity, because that is the primary reason why GPUs are expensive. So you see Sam Altman, all the top big shots of the world trying to now go in that direction. The last time when I think people solved for electricity, the GDP was like this, and then suddenly it shot up. It's already asymptotic, and I think again now when people will start solving for electricity, I don't know, it's just gonna go crazy faster.
The ecological footprint of AI, that's an entire different discussion in itself. The data centers, the services, and everything. Maybe we'll take that up as a later discussion at some point. Let's not go into that today. But looking at it, right? So AI tools like ChatGPT and everything, they have been popular and out there for like more than 2 years now. They became popular, really popular in the last 2 years. And companies have, like your companies have adopted it, folks over here have adopted it. Is there something different that you would do if you were to start today? Like if you wanted to start with it, like let's say you did not have it, or you have learnings and you're starting up a new company and you have to introduce these tools into your ecosystem, right? Are there any learnings that you have had, like how to adopt, how to pick tools, how to choose them? Like, are there any learnings that you would maybe want to give off to new people who are getting into the race, AI race?
I think one of the things that I would probably go for is like not obsessing a lot over, let's say, models or tools, which generally tends to happen when something is introduced in an organization, but focus on the governance aspect of it, like basically having a closer control over how something is being used, right? For example, from software development point of view, you would want to have the AI generate code as you want, right? So you need to have some constraints applied. You need to have some guardrails applied, right? You would somebody would prefer a consistent output from a model over getting different kind of outputs, right? So that is how the satisfaction increases in somebody's mind, right? When it is giving consistent answer over inconsistent answer across the team, right? So that is one thing. And the second thing is, I think, investing, putting more efforts and time on the tracing aspect of it or observability aspect of it, where you get to see, for example, for an agentic system, what action it took, why did it take it, what context did it use to take that action, right? So that you can actually debug issues faster, right? So so reproducibility is very important, and it's inherently very difficult for these non-deterministic systems. So I think we should be focusing more on those. So these are the few things that I would want to look deeper into if I were to start.
I can go from a product POV standpoint. What I saw a lot of people in the product landscape do was use these tools in silos for doing a couple of things. What I think I might have done differently is probably design a system around AI. How would your GTM engine look like? How would you do your user research? How would your product workflows look like? But then designing it using AI in the center. I think, yeah, thinking it from a very different systemic standpoint is something I feel could be a different take.
So I would say that I would start by encouraging everyone in my org to actually try these tools with an open mind as quickly as possible, and try them as tools, not as some magic wand that will solve some problem completely. But we are humans, we are adept at using tools, so this is another tool in your arsenal. So use it, understand its constraints and boundaries, and figure out where it can actually amplify your productivity as quickly as possible. If truly it does not, then it's okay to move on, right? Like, there are many skeptical people, myself included, who took a very long time to get on the train, right? But I think there is real value here. These are really powerful tools. So the sooner you try them out, the sooner you know its limits and advantages, the sooner you get to use it to amplify your productivity. So I would say just start early.
So I would probably the change, they've covered all the efficiency gains on the development side. I would also probably, just to add to what Saurav was saying, the product aspect of it, right? Everybody who's trying to solve AI in the consumer product space is just trying to put a sidebar where there's a chat window, and then your regular product is on the left side, the right side there's a chat window, right? And these two are sort of disconnected completely. And it's very, very shallow, because AI is an afterthought right from grounds up. Their vision, the employees, everybody thinks of AI as an afterthought. But if I were to start something now, there's not going to be a sidebar, right? It is going to have, every product which I build will have AI ingrained into the loop itself. So you're not chatting on a sidebar, but it is into the product, where it is well ingrained with the product. The state of your entire application, your backend systems are also completely wired up, so that you might have a much more better experience and not just a chat window, which is just answering your questions, right? I think that is where the real sort of unlock would be, that you don't still distinguish it as a sidebar.
Do you think AI agents are that kind of a reimagined product? Because that is central, right?
So the current version of the AI agents are also sort of duplicating a lot of functionality. For example, you have a product. Let's say you're doing e-commerce shopping. Your sidebar will be a totally disconnected experience, where you say, hey, I want to host a party, add some items into my cart, right? And then it will show a mini cart there, which is totally disconnected from your search experience, from your product discovery experience. So that has to fundamentally shift, right? It is not AI first, then it is like an afterthought, because they are all afterthoughts of AI.
I would like to hear from you, since you are in the AI space, and you have a very guarded approach of bringing AI into the ecosystem. That's actually, so I myself am a technology skeptic. So I actually did not introduce myself at the beginning. So I have been doing web development and application development for a couple of years. whenever I hear the new tool that is out in the market, I kind of am very skeptical, like this is not going to work, and then over time I do adopt it. But what I like to hear from skeptics is like, you have your guard systems in place when you build it. So since you have done it, I would like to hear from you, like you have overseen the adoption, like are there any lessons that you have learned?
I'll start with a joke, right? They say the S in IoT stands for security. So the same thing I would reimagine MCP. I would say this time don't miss the S when you develop MCP all over again. So I think that would be, because when I look at it today, the cybersecurity market also, if you look at it today and people that they're getting hit, see when people get hit with AI, it is a very, it causes a lot of damage and very real people's lives get impacted because of it. And it comes from very careless, design and thought process that has gone behind MCP. Now I know this is a bit of a strong take, because MCP does have its advantages. Stick an MCP onto anything and suddenly you can talk to it. But that freedom also has given a lot of security concerns, right? Most of the attacks that are happening today, there is always some contrived version of it where there is some MCP involved in some fashion or the other. So if I was to reinvent it, I would say redo MCP, right? And here is one thing that I have a very strong opinion on is that we've gone through HTTP. We came up with HTTPS because of HTTP. We had FTP, and we came with SFTP. We've done the S, like you say, right? It's an afterthought, right? We've done the S, the security part of it, after everything has been designed. We've had hundreds of these kind of product protocols today where the S has come after everything has been designed. That's why I say, look, when Anthropic was developing MCP, why didn't you guys think of the S, like how both of you guys say, right? Have AI centrally, don't keep it as an after. Same way, right? Design it with the security in mind. Why would you leave that out, right? That's my
following past precedent. HTTP, HTTPS. So now MCPS will follow.
Very true, very true. And it's the same principles, right? They're saying the same thing. Your MCP server should have a certificate. Maybe you should do MP, like, you should give your own, identity, like maybe certificate something that you have, whatever it is. But the point is they've missed the S, and there are already 110K, 20K active public MCP servers on the internet today. Probably redesign that. That would be my takeaway. Like, I would definitely do that. So
now MCP is part of Linux Foundation. So
yes. Yeah.
So I think we have had a couple of good topics to discuss around. If anybody has any questions that you want to ask us.
So is the adoption on SLMs, small language models?
I have no idea what you have asked. I'll ask the panel to answer that.
I would say,
Sorry, repeat the question. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I think he's talking about Edge ML.
I would like to know your thoughts on small language models, SLMs.
So at least because I come from the mobile space, if you're referring to the mobile version of the LLM, is that what you're referring to? Like something which runs on the edge on your device?
Yeah, there are like very tiny models that can run
on your laptops?
On mobiles.
Mobiles, right? Yeah. I think the adoption has been very minimal, primarily because the current version of SLMs take a lot of RAM and they take a lot of CPU, which means your phones get heated up. So, and they're also large in terms of size as well, like a couple of GBs, or if not, at least closer to a GB, right? Yeah, I'd experimented with a couple of them from the Google world and the Microsoft side as well. They're not yet there. So you would rather use a LLM hosted on the server and have like regular APIs dealing with it. And also one of the other parts is, why would you typically want to run an SLM is when latency is a problem or you want to run it offline. These are like the primary big use cases. If both of them are not your burning issues, you would rather have an LLM and then hosted and you just communicate through REST. Otherwise, the trade-off is not worth it.
Okay, all right. So I think we had a couple of good discussion topics that we addressed today. So one thing that I kind of learned is like AI tools are still the intern on the team. Don't trust them with access to infrastructure and production code and stuff. Still treat them as the little brother with the dummy controller. Have anybody faced that? Did you do it to your younger brothers where you handle the dummy controller which is not connected to the console? I guess I'm the evil one then. Okay, all right. Yeah, so forget that. We'll not talk about it. So AI tools are there. It's part and parcel of everybody's life, and we are adopting it, albeit in a very careful manner, so that you don't end up breaking your systems, your production systems at least. Break your local machines. That's something that you can still do. What we will do at the end of this thing is like we'll probably publish like an article with some key takeaways that we have from this thing, like some of the takeaways that we had. We publish it so that it's more formal and organized for everyone. We will also like ask everybody who is here, even whoever is online, to kind of like post under the article, have questions, and maybe like we'll take up these questions. So this is a series of talks that we'll be doing. There will be more talks. We'll take up more topics around AI adoption into ecosystems, how we are doing it. Maybe the infra guardrails thing really sounds like an exciting idea. Maybe we'll do a series around that as well. Right? So if anybody has any suggestions that you would like to have talks around, drop them in. I think we have an email ID or the comment form under this thing, and we can like, audit it and we can figure out like what all we can pick up and find people who are experienced in this thing. If people over here want to be part of the core panel, like the 4 of them, they can also like sign up with us and we can talk with you like what are the topics we can cover and do all of that, right? So I believe there is chai and snacks outside. We can like do some networking, talk to each other, right? Get to know each other, maybe ask questions which would otherwise not go online, and you can still ask those questions, right? So that's about it. I hope you all liked it. Yeah, liked it?
Yes.
Sorry, before you go, we have something for the panelists.
Oh yeah, for me.
From inside. So just hold on.
Okay, I'm getting something. Okay, so the thing is like I haven't been doing public sessions since COVID. Like it's a really long time since I've been out in public. So yeah, it's nice.
You did well. Don't worry.